If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place.
As the world stops in response to a viral pandemic, Africa Business Radio and the Nigerian Economic Summit Group are coming together to explore the challenges and opportunities for the nation. The ABRNESG podcast sees Nigeria's first business radio station teaming up with the nation's foremost private sector think tank on the implications of COVID-19 on the continent's largest economy.
All right, it's still a very, very good day here on Africa Business Radio, and we're going into something novel. I know the word novel has been in people's ears now in relation to something a bit, on the negative side of our health and causing a pandemic. But still on that subject, we are starting our partnership here with the Nigeria Economic Summit Group and Africa Business Radio, and we'll be looking at COVID-19 and Nigeria's socio-economic outlook. It's going to be a 5-part series, and we're going to be looking at the implications of what the pandemic is having, might have, or will have on the Nigerian economy, medium, short, and long term. And to do this with us, we have definitely, and of course, somebody from the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, the NESG. We are going to be having that conversation and going into all of that. Is Olayinka Inyolakon. Good day, sir, and welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's a privilege to be here. My time mentioned that you're the first person to get my surname right the first time, so kudos to you. It's fantastic.
All right, that's kudos to me. Congratulations to me. I think I'm pat myself on the back. Yeah. That's it. All right. So part 1 of the series is what you're listening to today, and we're going to go straight into it. So I'll ask the questions, and he will answer, and we'll banter a little bit. So here goes. Now you work at the economic think tank, the NESG, since 1993, set up doing some good things since then. What effect has COVID-19 had on businesses, livelihood, and the Nigerian economy?
Thanks for having me once again. I think it has had a grueling effect, on every single one of us. COVID-19 is in more than 230 countries. And, the world is a global market now. It's a neighborhood, when you cross over to anywhere, globalization has opened up the world, and it has also allowed the COVID-19 spread. But there's nothing to really panic about, because if you read history, you'll go back and you'll find out that there have been many pandemics down the years, and the world always recovers. And they say, if you put gold in the fire, that's when it comes out as gold. Yeah. So I'm sure that we will recover. There's no need to panic. However, it's been grueling on the livelihood of everybody. Everybody has taken it hard. Nigeria has, about 200 million people. And, the federal government officially has shut down Lagos, Abuja, and Ogun State. But if you realize, those are the nerve centers of the country. And also some state governors have followed suit to shut down their own states just to protect their people, because we all know that our healthcare system isn't the best. So the best way to do it is to use policies to keep people at home, to protect them. But one thing to note is that coronavirus affects different countries in different ways. In the famous New York City is shut down because health is, paramount.
Yeah.
But for Nigerians, it's quite different. Everyone around the world has employed social distancing because in many of these Western countries, most people have houses to go to. But it's quite different here. We have 200 million people. The president on Sunday announced that, some palliative safety nets will be provided to 2.8 million households. But according to Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, we have at least 80 million poor people, very poor people in the country. And we have 40 million unemployed or underemployed people. So 2.8 million, let's say 6 people per household, that's about about 18 million people that the program will reach, which means that there's a dearth of challenges that would confront us. And it's not insurmountable, but we would have to all come together and use something that we refer to as a trident to tackle this, challenge.
Now, explain that trident.
Well, Nigeria is heavily reliant on the oil sector, and its contribution to the GDP, and the oil prices have dropped significantly to have effects on the economy and also on foreign direct investment, because investors aren't, traveling around the world and looking for opportunities right now. Everyone is trying to shore up. So it would have great effects on our economy. But the good thing also that helps us at this moment is that our country has a huge informal economy as well. Not just the guys. So it means that would also help us. But sometimes the informal economy is hard to measure. But because of that, that's why I'm so optimistic that we will bounce back. But you would have serious effects on the formal economy. Why I say that is that just think about the trident. People say, medical is the most important thing, but the medics only treat people that are ill. But the also important thing in the trident. So number 1 is the medical efficiency. Mm-hmm. Number 2 is governance, and number 3 is communication. Right? That trident is the first trident. There are 2 tridents. I will explain the other one in a bit. So that first trident of using medical efficiency, which let's be honest, we do not really have, but through governance in this time, we've been able to react, particularly in Lagos State, and some other states. The state governors have stepped up to create isolation centers in partnership with the private sector. So that has helped. So that trident of medical efficiency, governance, and communication is what determines how COVID-19 affects every country of this world. For example, the number of cases of coronavirus in Germany is almost as high as Spain's numbers, but far lesser people have died, which is because they've used this trident of medical efficiency. We all know what we call German machines.
German machine.
Yes, they've used exceptional governance, and most importantly, communication. So when they say social distancing and stay at home, they've been clear on who should stay at home, how people should get their resources, how people should interact, how people should commute, how the market should work, how the essential services should work. So this trident is very important. And I believe that if we get it right, of course, we are, a teething economy and a state. But if we get it right to a certain level, we will be able to, solve our problems and the COVID-19 problems in our community at the moment.
Now, what does the other trident against COVID-19 mean?
The other trident is per barrel. Mid-March, it hit about 28.25, which means that the government cannot totally fund this process. So the other trident is the funding. We all know that no business works without funding. Nothing works without funding. So the trident is the government, which is, the federal, state, and local government funding the efforts. The second is something I would like to commend, which is where the NESG operates, which is private sector. Organized and informal private sector, is the second part of the trident. And the third, the international community. So the private sector has stepped up massively. I'm sure, many of us in the cities have heard about, so much money that the private sector have donated towards this cause. The government too, I spoke of safety nets that the government are putting in place. But the international community is important in helping us with, medical efficiency. I mentioned earlier that, without that efficiency, we can't do anything. Some weeks ago, there was some furore that some Chinese people came into Nigeria and are treating people. They came to train people. But if you notice, the European Union, the Dutch embassy, these people have been donating, finances, resources.
Achieve maximum efficiency at whatever it is we are doing or want to do to be rid of this pandemic. Now, what should be our priorities against COVID-19 at this time?
We have to utilize both, tridents to tackle a few of our priorities. I'll mention the priorities shortly, but I'd like to mention something quickly. It's the fact that in Lagos, about 6 million people live on incomes largely earned on a daily basis, and it represents millions of families who can only start buying or making meals, when that primary breadwinner gets home every day, and that breadwinner has not been able to go out. So, number one thing is, there's a new slang on the internet and on the streets now. They call it hunger virus, that it kills more than, the coronavirus, or it makes people do worse things. So, that's one thing that we need to the founder of Stanbic IBTC as well. He says the priorities are 7, not 8, not 9. The reason why he says that is because he's trying to do something that we usually don't do in Nigeria. We spread ourselves too thin and not focus on the actual things that need to be done. The number one thing is that we need test kits and testing capacity for things to get back to usual, for us to resume business as usual, for kids to go back to schools, for people to get back into stadiums, into stadia, into churches, into all of these things. We need testing kits and testing capacity. And like I mentioned, using the second trident, the private sector and the international partners can help with that, and also the government, because they are the intermediaries to make this happen. The second is we need functional molecular laboratories, and the laboratories will not operate themselves. So we need trained workers who operate them, just so that you do not say someone is negative and then they go back home and they spread the virus. It means that when someone is positive, the trained personnel catches it and, is able to do the needful. The third thing is that we need protective coverings. Let's be honest, for the world to go back to normal, which I'll be discussing, in the next few episodes, for it to go back to normal, we critically need to almost if we have to get back to work in a month, everybody at work is covered and the prices are not spiking. So, and that might involve using local methods into creating masks and gloves with local materials that are, of course, disinfected. So we need to solve our problem with made in Nigeria, solutions. Because if now you import those protective coverings, all of it, you don't know where you're importing it from. Number 4 is protective equipment for doctors. These wonderful people have been doing a phenomenal job, but they also have families. And if they are not protected, they won't be able to do their jobs. And their protective coverings are different from what the regular people should use because, their faces, their ears, their hands up to their elbows, should be protected because they deal with the people, they work in the front line. So we need better protective equipment, for doctors. Number 5 is medication. While, of course, they're working on vaccines and other medications, we would need to figure out certain ones that can reduce, when someone is infected, that can help the person go through the day, that can help the person breathe better, to feel better. So I'm sure that some of it, if you notice, in Lagos State, many cases have been announced that the persons have recovered. So they've been using some of those medication, but we need it en masse because if you notice, all over the world, it's about a month or 6 weeks after their first case that, the cases reach a peak. It spikes a lot. So we need so much medication so that we would not panic and we would be able to solve the challenges. Number 6, it is a word that we've been hearing a lot. It's it's ventilators, according to certain sources, before COVID-19, they stated that we had less than 500 ventilators in the country. And with the way you and I know that the country works, you know that maybe half of that don't work as efficiently. And this virus mostly affects, older people and people with underlying conditions, which means that they might not be able to breathe for themselves. And they're citizens of Nigeria and they do not deserve to die. So ventilators would help us solve this problem. And number 7, which is the most important thing, is that we need safety nets for 120 million Nigerians. Now, if we say that
nets without holes,
definitely without holes. At least if there are holes, but they are small pores, not large nets. Here's the reason. According to the MBS Bureau of Statistics, we have 80 million people. 40 million unemployed and underemployed, and those 80 million poor people are very poor people. They are not the people that have slipped out into that category because there are no jobs. They are not the people who have lost their jobs. They are not the people who have lost their livelihood. They are not the people who have gone into depression because, they've never had to stay at home for this long. So we need safety nets in food, in healthcare, in basic healthcare, in different amenities, different things, so that our population does not fall into anarchy or fall into depression, more depression. We need these safety nets, and it cannot all come from the government. It needs to come from our people. So if we are 200 million people and 100 million are disadvantaged, so you and I just need to feed 2 people every day, 2 extra people every day, right, from the little we have, and we might be able to reach out to people out there. And don't forget, we have many closed spaces right now. We have millions or maybe hundreds of thousands of religious houses right now that are shut down. Those places can serve as places where, they distribute food items in a good manner, which is where the first trident comes into place, communication, so that people understand social distancing. For example, I was walking by a mosque yesterday and I saw about 40 people praying side by side. I believe that they know about the COVID-19 virus, but they've not been educated on how they should be distant. So our communication, which I am a professional of, a lot more needs to be done. Rural communication, word of mouth is still the best form of communication because not all our people can afford data to be on the internet. So we need to, communicate better, and we need to do more. And convinced that if we prioritize in the next coming episodes, I'll be discussing how we should not let this crisis go to waste, because crisis makes or mar countries, and we can use this opportunity to finally attain the potential that Nigeria deserves.
Fantastic. I cannot wait to listen and be part of the next episode, because it's part of some of the things I've been saying, that the lessons we are supposed to learn from this crisis, we will be doing ourselves one of the biggest disservices if we come out, from this crisis and we remain the way we are as a people. Thank you so much, Olayinka, for being a part of the pilot edition of this COVID-19 and Nigeria socio-economic outlook.
Thank you very much.
A production of Africa Business Radio and the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, of which you are a member.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right, so until the next episode, stay safe and, let's get you can tweet at us or send us a message on Twitter. We are at Africa Biz Radio, and just let us know what your thoughts are. Stay safe in this period, and we will see you on the next episode.
This program was produced by Africa Business Radio in collaboration with the Nigerian Economic Summit Group.